operators be bought out by large processing companies and other outside interests who may not have any interest in our rural coastal communities of Nova Scotia whatsoever.
Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I got to thank the member opposite for getting me off my seat during this session. It's been nice to get up. The member opposite we'll try. Well, the member opposite knows full well that licensing and licensing policy is that of the federal government. We just recently had the fishery policy review released a month or so ago from the federal government, in which it's about a 40-page document in which about a page and a half is dedicated to this very issue. This issue goes back sometimes in the 80s and 70s, where fish plants were not able to buy licenses, yet license holders and fishermen were allowed to build fish plants. There's a number of inequities within that policy, and the fish, and I'm sure the federal government is working hard towards it. We as a province have been supporting the idea of not professionalization, but of owner-operator to try to keep the vessels in our communities.
The member for Digby-Annapolis on your first supplement.
There is an overall limit to the number of licenses available in the inshore sector. An individual limit supposed to be one license per holder. Such a limit will spread the wealth around and promote greater involvement of people in the coastal fisheries. Owner-operators cannot compete with large companies and their financial resources, which can accumulate the licenses, creating less jobs in coastal communities and hurting this province financially. Mr. Speaker, what assurance will the minister give me today in writing that the independent owner-operator of Nova Scotia, that this government will continue to support the inshore fishery and their owner-operator policy?
And I just thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I brought up this fishery policy review, and there's a number of issues held within it, but unfortunately it's very short on actual substance of what the federal government really wants to do in this issue, because there are so many things sort of wrong with the way that it had been going. We as a department have been working to get this recognized by the federal government, and we will continue to do so. As for the member opposite's request, I will be happy to speak with him after this session.
Member Digby-Annapolis on your final supplementary.
The Federal Minister of Fisheries and Inshore Fishermen are saying that PEI, New Brunswick, Quebec, Newfoundland have come out with written documents supporting their inshore fishermen and owner-operator fleet separation policy. Mr. Speaker, I'm being told by inshore fishermen of Nova Scotia that this government has not submitted anything in writing to the Federal Department of Fisheries in support of this policy. My question is, if the minister has submitted this support document in writing, could I receive a copy? And if he hasn't, can he please submit to me one today?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Well, I'm glad the members opposite thinks that I can produce documents on a whim. I apologize. I do, as I said to the member opposite on a number of occasions, that I do support the idea of owner-operator and keeping those within our communities. I've said this to the minister on a number of occasions. I've said it to the previous minister on a number of occasions, and I've stood up and I've said it to a number of people. And the member opposite knows this full well. Thank you very much.
Now, member for Halifax, Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when this government released its auto insurance plan last June, the minister responsible for insurance estimated that 10,000 people would leave the Facility Association, the high-risk insurance pool, as a result. Well, the latest Facility Association numbers are in. There are now 36,530 drivers insured by the Facility Association in Nova Scotia, and that is 10,000 more than there were at this time last year, and 26,000 more than there were 2 years ago. Mr. Speaker, when will the minister responsible for the Insurance Act admit? When will he admit that the Liberal Tory plan to get people out of Facility Association is a complete an unmitigated disaster.
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, at this time last year, we were in the House, and I made a commitment at that time that we would reduce the insurance premiums paid by Nova Scotia motorists by 20%. Mr. Speaker, unlike other governments around this country, Mr. Speaker, we have delivered.
Now, member for Halifax Fairview, and your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, Jeff Lutz is a constituent of mine and one of the 10,000 people forced into facility last year. He's a courier. When he renewed his insurance in February, he found out he was being pushed for the first time in 35 years, being pushed into facility. He also found out that his insurance rates were going up by 58%. His rates were not rolled back by 20%. He has never received a rebate check, and in 35 years, he is claims-free. Mr. Speaker, my question for the minister responsible for the Insurance Act is, when can Nova Scotians expect that the disastrous Liberal Tory plan to get people out of facility will be fixed?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, the honourable member has got it all wrong. The Liberals were never part of this plan. This was our plan.
Order. Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I am very proud that it's our plan because we've put back now $55 million in rebates into the pockets of Nova Scotian motorists.
Now, member Halifax Fairview, on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I want that minister to imagine that Jeff Lutz is sitting here, 35 years in the business, claims-free, no rebate, in facility, rates up 58%. What would that minister say to Mr. Lutz to convince him that the plan that was supposed to get people out of facility is actually going to work for him and not against him?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, first of all, I would suggest that Mr. Lusk should probably contact the Superintendent of Insurance and determine exactly what the circumstances are with regard to the premium that he's paying and as to why he is in facility. Mr. Speaker, I would point out, though, that nowadays, compared to where we were 1 year ago, if you are in facility, at least you can find out why you were there.
Now a member for Halifax Fairview.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that'll make Mr. Lutz feel a whole lot better. Sure. Mr. Speaker, last fall, a coalition of tourism operators, recreation and small business groups got together to voice their concerns about liability insurance. Yep. They presented a report to government that calls on the government to review the problems, set up an interdepartmental task force, and come up with solutions. The coalition predicted that without the government's help, this year would be a very difficult year for small business and volunteers. So my question to the minister responsible for the Insurance Act is, what is this government's plan to address the liability insurance problems raised by the coalition 6 months ago?
There you go. The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member is probably aware, we have established an insurance review board. We have tasked that insurance review board to come forward with a report, Mr. Speaker, by November of this year.
Now, member Halifax Fairview, on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, John Fursland is a small business operator. He owns and operates Molega Tours of Atlantic Canada. He has a staff of 125 part-time employees. But 1 month ago, the Halifax Port Authority told this successful small business that he would need an extra $1 million in liability insurance to operate on their property. No less than 3 brokers have been unable to help Mr. Fursland. The one offer he had was at a premium of $50,000. Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister responsible for the Insurance Act, what is this government going to do to help tourism operators like Mr. Fursland before this tourism season is over.
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I can assure the honourable member who's addressing a problem of a Mr. Fursland, I believe it was, that we will indeed solve that problem as we have solved the auto insurance problem, but however, it will not be before we have adequate information, Mr. Speaker, which will be achieved by the Insurance Review Board before November 1st of this year.
Now, Member Halifax Fairview and your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, November 1st is too late for Mr. Fursland and the other tourism operators in this province. They can't get liability insurance. So we know that the insurance problems in Nova Scotia haven't stopped with auto insurance. 10,000 more people in facility. Last week we pointed out home insurance has increased by 17% in the last year, and I spoke to a broker last week who said we haven't seen anything yet. Today we're pointing to a small business operator whose very existence is threatened by problems with liability insurance. So my question to the minister responsible for the Insurance Act is, when is the minister going to take responsibility for insurance and act?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, we are acting. And Mr. Speaker, this is a problem that's not confined to Nova Scotia. It's a problem facing every province across this country, Mr. Speaker. And we're going to do this in partnership, not only with the other provinces, Mr. Speaker, but with the federal government as well.
The Honourable Member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Environment. On May 3rd, the Department of Environment okayed a 47-megawatt natural gas turbine for Tufts Cove. And it appears to me that burning natural gas is a lot more efficient and a lot cleaner than burning high-sulfur bunker C oil. My question to the Minister is, isn't it cleaner to operate natural gas turbine than operating the present high-sulfur bunker C oil with a brown cloud that hangs over the city and is expanding outward in all directions from the center of the city in a large brown cloud creating smog? And I will note on the eastern part of the area out to as far as Lake Echo, which is about a 10-kilometer move in the smog in the last 8 to 10 years.
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to confirm that it certainly is cleaner to burn natural gas than it is crude oil.
Now, Member for Preston on your first supplementary.
Yes. Well, I'm very pleased that you've confirmed that natural gas is cleaner. So why would the department have the audacity to say that you can only burn natural gas at peak times when they're burning high sulfur bunker C on a regular basis in Tufts Cove, creating all kinds of health problems and other problems? My question to the minister is, did the minister and the department do an overall review of the effects of the smog on the regional municipality and Nova Scotia by allowing only peak times burning of natural gas instead of the high sulfur bunker C that you allow every day?
Now, Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we have to differentiate between short-term and long-term. And in the short term, certainly the turbine that's been approved to operate to ensure that there's electricity for the houses at peak times in the province is an important thing, and it is clean. In the long term, we certainly are looking at improvements in way that we can reduce the pollution that is expended in this province.
Now, Member for Preston on your final supplementary.
Thank you. And it's hard to believe I just got that answer. Natural gas is cleaner. It's a short-term solution, but at least it's a better solution than what we have today. My final question is going to be to the Minister of Health. Ask the Minister what steps the Minister of Health is taking to ensure that the Department of Environment forces this serious problem with pollution generated by the Power Corporation in this province is corrected so that people of Nova Scotia can live longer and healthier and not have to live with the problems such as cancer, asthma, and lung diseases that we're seeing that are caused by this serious problem, burning bunker C and dirty fuel.
Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member would know that the Department of Environment deals with regulations with respect to air quality. And those regulations, of course, flow from standards that are established nationally and applied, and as information becomes available, those regulations are adjusted to reflect those realities on a national and international basis. And obviously, the honourable member should realize, as has been indicated by the Minister of Environment and Labour, that we are indeed responding to a short-term situation with respect to the supply of electricity within this province, and that short-term solution is one which needs to address the needs of Nova Scotians. In the longer term, we of course will ensure that our regulations reflect the health of the province. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'm a member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question's for the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, Sunday is Mother's Day, when we honor the sacrifices mothers make in order to nurture their children and offer them the best life possible. In this province, many mothers are forced to sacrifice their education and almost all hope of earning a living wage due to draconian policies of the Department of Community Services. Under the Employment Support and Income Assistance regulations, clients are not permitted to collect benefits while attending university or any educational or training program over 2 years. My question to the Minister of Community Services is, why is your government continuing to legislate poverty for so many Nova Scotians?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services, have about 8 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, I take exception to the premise of the question. That is not so. Thank you.
Order, please. Time allotted for question period has expired. We have 2 introductions. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South on introduction.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to bring to your attention and to members of the House the presence in the West Gallery today of 3 distinguished gentlemen from Sydney who are here in Halifax on a bowling tournament this week. And I'd like to introduce them. First of all, Mr. Speaker, in a little preamble, I'm very proud to be a life member of the Ashby branch of the Royal Canadian Legion in Sydney, and we have with us today the president of that branch, Mr. Mel Crow, who was with us. Also, another distinguished gentleman, Mr. Joel McNeil, who was the vice president of that branch. And in between those 2 gentlemen, we have Mr. Cliff Surrett, who is the chairman of the sports committee for the Ashby Legion branch, and also, I might add, Mr. Speaker, a member of the Nova Scotia Hall of Fame, Sports Hall of Fame. So I'd like to welcome those gentlemen here today and have them rise.
Certainly welcome the special guest to the gallery today, the Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia, Municipal Relations, on introduction.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to introduce to you and to all members of the House today in our East Gallery. We have visiting with us Councillor Richie Cotton from Richmond County. He's here today in Halifax meeting with the Minister of Environment on solid waste issues. And we could ask Richie Cotton to stand and receive the warm welcome of the House.
Certainly welcome this special guest to the gallery today. Order, please. Order, please. Y'all member Cape Breton South on opposition members' business.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Speaking on the bill today. Okay. I thought there might have been more.
Opposition members' business.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill 63?
Bill number 63.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise today on Bill 63 to discuss what I consider to be a very important topic that's been current lately in the House, and also as a result of the introduction by our party of a bill to provide for the Department of Rural Economic Development in this province. Mr. Speaker, I heard earlier today the Premier talking about the economy, and I can only say to you, Mr. Speaker, that the Premier must be living in a dream world when he talks about the...
Order, please. Order, please. There's too much noise in the chamber. I ask the members to take their conversations outside, please. Now, member Cape Breton South has the floor.
When the Premier talks, Mr. Speaker, about the economy growing in Nova Scotia and about the effects of the balanced budget on that economy and the effects of initiatives of the Department of Economic Development, it was also mentioned, Mr. Speaker, during question period that The Department of Vital Statistics in this country have stated that the growth in the economy of Nova Scotia is the worst in the country. I didn't say that. You know, no one else in Nova Scotia said that. This is a national body, a well-respected body, Stats Canada, who have said the economy of Nova Scotia is not growing, Mr. Speaker. It's growing at less than 1%. Yet, Mr. Speaker, this government has in its budget estimates this year revenue projections of 3% growth, which means that if you put the two together, there's a tremendous contradiction here, Mr. Speaker, between what this government is projecting in terms of growth this year and, in fact, what is happening in this province, which means, essentially, Mr. Speaker, that this budget is not balanced. This budget is not balanced if you believe Statistics Canada, who states that the growth is going to be less than 1%. But you know what, Mr. Speaker, if the Premier wants to join the debate, he can certainly get up and when I sit down and join this debate. What I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, is by the time Nova Scotians find out that this budget is not really balanced, the House will have risen. The Premier will probably be thinking about doing something else down the road. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, I can't wait for the quarterly reports, the next quarter and the quarter after that, from the Auditor General of Nova Scotia. But let's deal with something here that we know for sure. Since January, Mr. Speaker, we have learned the following. Britex, 80 jobs lost. Avon Foods in Berwick, 150 jobs lost. Trenton Works, 42 jobs lost. Transcontinental Media in Yarmouth, 71 jobs lost. Transcontinental Media New Minas, 22 jobs lost. A 20% unemployment rate, Mr. Speaker, in Cape Breton, that this Premier has the nerve in this House during question period to say that the economy is thriving in Cape Breton when there's a 20% unemployment rate down there as we speak.
Shame.
Tell the people of Cape Breton what a wonderful economy is going on down there. And, Mr. Speaker, there are further storm clouds coming in jobs going to be lost in Cape Breton. We know that, the Premier knows that, and Cape Bretoners certainly know it. Mr. Speaker, this is the tip of the iceberg. What we have in areas outside of Halifax is a structural economic crisis. Rural regions, even our largest towns, are losing population. As a matter of fact, a key word, a buzzword in Nova Scotia is becoming depopulation. In all sectors of Nova Scotia, save and except Halifax Regional Municipality. Throughout Nova Scotia, the word depopulation is becoming heard and spoken more often than not. The shame of that, Mr. Speaker, is that the government, the Premier, the Minister of the Office of Economic Development, which the Premier earlier today touted as the main engine for driving the economy. Mr. Speaker, that department has gone from a budget of over $90 million 2 years ago down to less than $50 million today, and has been reduced from a full ministry down to the Office of Economic Development in Nova Scotia. Is that the kind of plan that's driving the economy of Nova Scotia? NSBI has been set up as an arm's-length agency to the Department of Economic Development, Mr. Speaker, and that agency has done very little except position a few call centers around the province on the basis of a previously designed formula by the McClellan government that called for a payroll tax rebate to encourage people to relocate in Nova Scotia. There's been no innovation on behalf of this government, Mr. Speaker, none whatsoever. The Premier and his government even said that they would not get involved in creating business opportunities at all in Nova Scotia. They said, Mr. Speaker, at the time when they were elected, that the private sector should be taking care of that and not government. Government shouldn't be involved. Well, what you have now is an arm's-length agency of government called Nova Scotia Business, Inc., that is not responsible directly to this legislature, but is putting money into the economy in call centers. Where is the innovation there? All we need to put call centers in place in this province now is a clerk somewhere in an office to sign the agreements. The structure has been put there. Maybe we need another clerk to find office space for them, and maybe we need a third clerk to tell them where they can buy housing when they come here for their executives. But certainly, Mr. Speaker, there's nothing innovative about what's been happening in the province in terms of job creation. What's happening, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that this government has abandoned ship when it's come to rural Nova Scotia, and I might add, Mr. Speaker, Cape Breton Island. The only thing that's going on in Cape Breton Island is federally driven. The only thing. The Growth Fund has, I believe, $12 million from this province over 6 years. That's the sum total of their investment in Cape Breton. They have an economic development office down there with one person waiting to retire, with no ability to talk to small business entrepreneurs, and worse than that, no ability to sign off on loans for those entrepreneurs. What we have is an economy in demise in Cape Breton. If it wasn't for the federal initiatives down there, the situation would be much worse than it is now. Much worse. The province probably has taken advantage of every single announcement that's been made down there with photo ops from its resident Minister of Energy, the MLA for Cape Breton North, who was actually the Minister of Politics for Cape Breton. He's taken that role over from Rodney, or the Minister of Tourism. He's the spin doctor, the MLA for Cape Breton North. He's the spin doctor, or quite more correctly, the chief apologist for the government, Industrial Cape Breton. He continues to tell Cape Bretoners that the economy is fine, yet there's 20% unemployment. He holds a press conference in a high school, Mr. Speaker, to talk about what wonderful things are happening in the energy sector, when in fact nothing is happening in the energy sector. There is no activity at all in Cape Breton regarding energy alternative sources. The Laurentian Group, a number of private entrepreneurs, some of them very friendly to this government, have invested money in Point Edward, and they're sitting there waiting for something to happen. And nothing is happening, yet the minister keeps telling the world that we're just on the cusp, we're just right there with energy initiatives, and there's going to be all kinds of prosperity in the future because of energy initiatives that he as a minister is putting forward. Well, that's maybe a good theory. The reality is nothing is happening, absolutely nothing. People are leaving rural Nova Scotia in droves from Sydney to Yarmouth and everywhere in between. In his own county, the Premier's own county of Pictou County, they're starting to feel the problem of lack of economic development in their part of Nova Scotia as well. And this can't continue, Mr. Speaker. This cannot continue. And I believe this government has a responsibility, Mr. Speaker, a responsibility to pay attention to the needs of the economy outside of Halifax Regional Municipality. And I've said it time and time again that the economy in Halifax is buoyant. It's buoyant enough to survive on its own. And it does so very nicely. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, most business people in Halifax want to get government out of the way when they're doing things here. And Roger Taylor says that in the Chronicle Herald. He says there's a philosophy among certain people that government should be involved. There's another philosophy that government should be involved. One philosophy for rural Nova Scotia, which I believe there's a role for government to play, and another philosophy for Halifax Regional Municipality that states that the private economy can do it very nicely on their own and don't need the assistance or the handouts from NSBI or the Office of the Department of Economic Development, which has no money anyway. If you take the salaries out of there, and if you take the salaries out of NSBI, they don't have much money. Matter of fact, I believe NSBI's budget was cut $5 million the past year. Now they're starting to whittle back on that one too. But government must get involved, Mr. Speaker, and government must provide the leadership. Must provide the leadership, Mr. Speaker. The government, Mr. Speaker, doesn't get it. The government is trying to convince Nova Scotians on a daily basis that the economy is fine in this province, when in fact the performances suggest that that's just not the case. That's just not the case, Mr. Speaker. And Nova Scotians know that. Nova Scotians have been subject to, I believe, a confusing set of principles when it comes to this government dealing with their daily lives. For example, the Premier stated when he got elected there'd be no increases in taxes in this province except increases in gas tax. Well, what came along after that was a litany of increases in user fees. And they said, well, they're not taxes, Mr. Speaker, they're user fees. Now suddenly they're all taxes. they're all taxes now. You know, 506 new taxes inflicted upon Nova Scotians. And the 155 that was given to some Nova Scotians, not all, poor didn't get it, students didn't get it, senior citizens didn't get it, should have went into the start of a rural economic development in this province. I'll bet you, Mr. Speaker, that that crowd wishes they had that day over again when they sent them 155 checks out. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Recognize the Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to rise today to speak on Bill 63, because this bill offers an opportunity to talk about the leadership of this government and the climate this government has been able to establish over the last 5 years in dealing with the economy of Nova Scotia, and particularly rural Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, unlike the previous speaker, I'm going to stick to the facts. And the facts in this province, dealing since this government came to power, elected by the people of Nova Scotia, on the economic front, is one of progress and increased numbers. And I want to quote a few facts to you, and these facts do come from Stats Canada, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in rural Nova Scotia, in 1993, there were 18,947 businesses existed or registered. Mr. Speaker, in the year 2003, there are 30,758 businesses registered in the province of Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, I want to break that down into regions by rural Nova Scotia, and these are Stats Can's numbers. If I look at Cape Breton Island, in 1993, there was 5,144 businesses. In 1999, there was 6,804. In 2003, Stats Can's, Mr. Speaker, 6,783 businesses in Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. A significant increase over that time period. People registering a business, starting businesses, growing businesses in rural Nova Scotia. I also want to talk about a few other counties or regions in Nova Scotia. If we pick the county of Yarmouth, we see it going from 1,109 to 2,040. If we pick the wonderful county of Cumberland, it goes from 1,192 businesses to 1,813 businesses, to give you an idea. Every county in Nova Scotia has seen a significant increase in the number of businesses operating in Nova Scotia. They're not decreasing, Mr. Speaker, they're increasing. The Liberals would like Nova Scotians to believe that they have a plan and that the economy is in decline. Well, Mr. Speaker, the facts speak clearly for themselves. The economy of this province is moving forward. And when we look at issues dealing with employment, Mr. Speaker, I think it's very important to look at the number of people employed. In March of 1999, Stats Can, the employment numbers were 388,000. In March of 2004, they're at 421,500. This significant increase in population or employment, over 33,000 new jobs in Nova Scotia in the last 5 years. Those are not decreases, Mr. Speaker, they're increases. And certainly for Cape Breton, when you look at the numbers, in March of 99, 49.1 was the 491,000 was the number of people employed in Cape Breton. March of 2002, an increase to 51,200. When you look at the North Shore of Nova Scotia, Pictou, Cumberland, Colchester, and several other counties included in that, Mr. Speaker, 99, 61,300. In the year 2004 March, 71,500. And Mr. Speaker, I can go through every region in Nova Scotia, and there are a net increase in the number of jobs, which is hugely significant for the economy of this province, and it shows that opportunities for prosperities is setting the climate, and this government is showing the leadership that is causing the economy to grow in Nova Scotia so we can provide those roads with the extra dollars we had. The previous government had cut the capital budget, cut it, till there was virtually nothing done in roads. It was down around $30 million. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to say that our administration knows roads is the infrastructure for tourism. It is the infrastructure for healthy and welfare and economic welfare of Nova Scotians, and we've more than doubled that budget. As a matter of fact, we've near tripled that budget. I want to look at some unemployment statistics. Again, Statistics Canada. In 1999, the number for Cape Breton as a region, the unemployment rate, Mr. Speaker, in 99 was 17.4%. In 2003, the last year for facts, it was 16.2, a significant decrease, Mr. Speaker. As well, if you look at the North Shore, 99, 10.5. It's decreased to 9.9. When you look at Annapolis Valley, practically even. Southern Nova Scotia, 10.4, 10.6. When you look at Metro, 6.8, 6.7. All those numbers, Mr. Speaker, indicate growth in Nova Scotia. Net new jobs, if you look at that number, Mr. Speaker, Cape Breton, a net increase from 2000 to 2003 of 300 new jobs. North Shore, 2,300 new jobs. Annapolis Valley, 4,100 new jobs. Southern Nova Scotia, 48. And in Halifax, 45. Some of those increases in the region even outstripping the growth that we see in HRM here. But Mr. Speaker, the reality is unemployment has decreased over the last 4 years in most areas of Nova Scotia, and certainly when you go to a regional basis, they have. Employment numbers in rural Nova Scotia have increased year over year in virtually every one of those areas. And these particular statistics fly in the face of the remarks made by the member opposite. And they're facts. They're from Stats Canada. They're from the Business Registry. We see opportunities in the IT sector coming about. When we look at some examples of IT sector, we see Ocean Nutrition's new operation in Mulgrave. We see a number of greenfield manufacturing, such as Tesma, located in North Sydney, Mr. Speaker. We also see Acadian Sea Plants, and the numbers and names of companies that are moving in that realm moves forward and forward. Also, Nova Scotia Business Inc. in partnership with the Cape Breton Growth Fund, which we are partners and contributors to, work strongly and are ever vigilant, not only in Nova Scotia for opportunities to grow and maintain operations, but also looking outward across North America and the globe so that new business partners, new opportunities that can provide good paying jobs for rural locations across Nova Scotia are integrated into our economy. This growth that we're seeing in the last 5 years is growth that is not centered around so much greenfield manufacturing or expansion of traditional industries that have incorporated technology. It's growth of new companies, new ideas, new innovation, and new technology. And as a province, we're supporting that with infrastructure dollars for hospitals, schools, community college, training and new programs, and a concentration on our workforce for upgrades and retraining to prepare for even more prosperity, Mr. Speaker, into the future. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks and dealing with facts only, I'd like to pass the remainder of time to my colleague from Kings North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Kings North.
Very happy to rise to speak to this resolution, and I'll be addressing myself to the assembled hordes of Liberals in the House this afternoon because they brought forth this resolution, and I hope that they'll listen very intently and that their ears will perk up as I speak, because I want to speak directly to them as a caucus since they've brought this resolution forward. I speak, Mr. Speaker, as a MLA who represents a rural riding, the riding of Kings North, a riding I'm very, very proud of, a riding as the member for the beautiful Colchester-Musquodoboit Valley reminded me is a centre of agriculture, and then we mustn't lose sight of these traditional industries when we talk about economic development. I'm glad our government isn't. But the issue I want to speak about is the issue of transportation, because I've been involved very heavily back in '99 when I was asked to run, and I met with the then leader of the third party, the Premier of the province the Honourable John Ham, and he asked me what were the issues that I saw that were important to my riding and to Kings County as a whole. And one of the key issues that I stated back then in '99, I remember in a motel room in Wallen we were chatting, as I said, the twinning of the 101. The twinning of the 101 is essential not only for safety reasons, but it's essential for economic reasons. With the loss of the railway down through the valley, we have to have a good twinned highway in order to deliver goods back and forth into the centre of Halifax. And so I want to challenge the Liberal members who bring forward these motions all the time. I want to challenge them to do something to help make this twinning of the 101 a reality, because to date I've seen very little movement on the part of the Liberal caucus, and I want to challenge them because they have a favoured position with their federal counterparts. And I want them to use this leverage that they have, Mr. Speaker, with their federal counterparts to do something to continue on with the twinning, because right now the provincial government has been working very hard. The Honourable Ron Russell, Minister of Transportation, I know this has been a project that he's pushed, and he's had to do all the pushing, it seems, all the heavy lifting. And we have it now twinned to Avonport, but after that we have no agreement with the federal government. The federal government is missing, Mr. Speaker, and they need to be there, because a twinned highway going down to Colebrook and then beyond upgrades in passing and interchanges on the way through will do more for rural development in that stretch of Nova Scotia than any motion they want to bring forward to the House. So I want to challenge the Liberal members sitting opposite to put action to their words, not just talk the talk, but walk the walk, and work with their Liberal counterparts, work with the MPs for the area, Scott Bryson and Robert Thibault, both members of the Liberal government, and want to urge them to use the leverage they have as provincial Liberals with their federal Liberals to do something to get this 101 twinning beyond Avonport. Because we're willing as a government. We've stated previously that this is our #1 twinning project. We have shown our commitment time and time and time again, but it's a cost-shared highway. We need the federal government, the federal Liberals there. They're not there, are they, honourable members? At least I haven't seen them there. The Honourable Tony Valeri came. We're very happy to have him come. We welcomed him with open arms, and it was a delight for him to come to open the first stretch. But let's have him come back, or let's have the MPs who are there. Let's have them make an announcement that the federal government's coming in on this cost sharing on the next session, besides vain promises. And so I want to challenge the members of the third party who are here to use their position with their Liberal counterparts federally, and to get them to come and make some concrete promises about furthering the twinning of the 101, because we know that the twinning of the 101 will further the economic development of a vast sector of rural Nova Scotia, extending all the way down to Yarmouth on that side. Many different ridings will be benefited from the twinning of the 101, some of the ridings represented by members on that in that caucus. And so I encourage you to use the position you have, the clout that you have. If you want to truly help rural Nova Scotia, and the part of rural Nova Scotia that I represent, get after your federal counterparts, get them to come to the table, get them to actually deliver, beside vague promises, to deliver in terms of coming and signing an agreement with the province of Nova Scotia to finish the next part of the twinning. That would help, Mr. Speaker. That would be a prime help.
Order.
The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Well, just on a point of order, Mr.
There's
Speaker,
only
the honourable
4
member-
seconds left.
40 seconds?
4 seconds.
I'll pass.
Thank you. I'll recognize the honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, this is an interesting notion that the Liberals have. It might even possibly be a worthwhile notion. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that if this Department of Rural Economic Development, if they had their way, is no more effective than the Department of Economic Development was when they were in government, then I'm not sure why they would want to go this route. They are a party that all too late has recognized the value of rural Nova Scotia, to my way of thinking. And why do I say that? Well, I think you can tell, certainly by the members who have seats in this House and how many Liberal seats are in rural Nova Scotia, and compared to 1993 with the very large John Savage majority that the Liberals had in this House, and rural Nova Scotia has sent a message to the Liberal caucus and the Liberal Party, and perhaps this bill, Bill 63, is their response. Well, so be it for them. I would say that certainly one question that that party, the government opposite, and our party as well, has to ask itself, and that is, does it see any value in a plan for rural economic development? That is this something that would resonate with an agenda that any government would have, and is there value in pursuing an agenda of trying to stabilize rural communities in this province? Well, certainly for me, I say yes. I see this is a valuable thing to do, and that it would be, I think, in the best interest when it comes to crunching numbers. If you move people into urban areas, that has a cost. So the question is, certainly, is it worth your while to have policy and strategy in place that keeps people in rural Nova Scotia, but does it in a meaningful way that's not purely, a make-work project that's somehow artificially supported by taxpayers' dollars. Now, when I attack the Liberal caucus saying that finally they've discovered rural Nova Scotia, then I have to say one of the most telling examples that comes to me is in 1998, when I first got elected to this House, Mr. Speaker, was around the attack on the Middleton Grain Centre. It was the development of East Coast commodities by the Liberal government, and how that action alone very clearly indicated to the agricultural community, which certainly makes up a big part of the rural economy, that the Liberal Party was not particularly interested in supporting rural Nova Scotia. And I think they bore the brunt of that at the ballot box. But other things come to mind, and that's why I raised the issue of whether or not a Department of Rural Economic Development would have any greater significance under this party, if they were government, than the Department of Economic Development had under that party. The things that come to mind right off the bat are Dynatech and TexLink and Orenda Recip, in which the failings of Orenda just only so recently in our time in this House, $9 million from the provincial government, $9 million from the federal government, with absolutely what appears to be absolutely no way to ever recoup any amount of that. And I want to say $9 million invested in the rural economy would be a good thing, but putting it all into an area that where you have absolutely no chance to recoup any benefit certainly smacks to me of cronyism or patronage or whatever you want to call it. But somebody knew somebody who was a good friend, I think, in terms of getting a benefit like that. We have seen in rural Nova Scotia a great demise in the population. the minister talks about StatsCan numbers. I know you can look at StatsCan numbers and you can read them in many ways. And certainly, I know if StatsCan was to give the numbers of farmers in Nova Scotia, it would certainly be a much more significant number of farmers in rural Nova Scotia than what we would think about in terms of those farmers who make their full-time living and income off of farming. And I know they would find me in those stats, Mr. Speaker, and I would be someone that definitely does not make more than 51% of my income off the little farming operation that I have, although I definitely feel the, what I spend certainly on my operation. But I would be in those statistics. So when the Minister in charge of economic development for the province stands up and speaks about StatsCan numbers, he should more clearly indicate that, sure, there may be a lot of new businesses that have been created. There may be a lot of businesses that are making between $0 and $5,000 a year. They may be people who actually have had no other option and are trying to make it on their own and took this route. But whether or not these businesses are actually ones that are large enough to employ more than one employee is not clear, or the fact that those people are actually making a good living from those businesses. So these are people that, in part, are probably forced into starting their own business just because of downsizing or whatever, and actually the numbers may go up. If we look at Britex and Avon Foods, next year the minister can be talking about statistics that would indicate that there's more businesses created because some of these employees may have to turn to creating their own little business in order to support their families. And I would say that if this is the basis of economic development that the minister's going on, then I think he's missing the mark. I'd like to talk a bit about what I would deem to be the resource sector in this province that actually has been getting short thrift by this province. The fact that roughly $80 million worth of beef a year comes into this province, and Nova Scotia beef farmers are getting close to nothing for their beef presently. And this is an area that not only the value of the value-added product that winds up in display cases in this province, but also the spin-off industries, the increased value for machinery dealers and for abattoirs. There is the potential for job creation above and beyond the farm in that one commodity sector. And Nova Scotians are buying about the equivalent of 9,000 animals a month into this province to supply their needs when we finish less than 9,000 animals a year. So this is certainly an area that the government has not looked at, or the previous government didn't turn their hand to supporting the beef industry in this province. And that's only one example. The fishery is the same, although I have to give credit to the present government when it came to trying to stop the outflow of crab and trying to get it processed in this province. That was some action that the present government undertook, and I have to applaud them for doing that. But there are small coastal communities that the government has to turn its attention to whether or not it deems these communities to be important, whether or not keeping those communities sustainable and keeping people in them is in the best interest of not only the government but of the people of Nova Scotia, and certainly I believe that it is, and it can be done in a concrete way. That if the government is willing to write off $40 million or so a year, as it did in the last year on bad investment, then I think it could turn some of those dollars into good investment for the people of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to be sharing my time with my colleague, the member for Halifax-Rebecto, and relinquish the floor to him presently.
Thank you. I'll recognize the honourable member for Halifax-Rebecto with about 4 minutes remaining.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and my thanks to my colleague from Hants East for allowing me a little time to comment. Although we're focused this afternoon on a particular piece of legislation, Bill 63, that has a specific focus, that is the proposal to create a new Department of Rural Economic Development, this debate has to be seen as a continuation of the discussion we held on the floor of the legislature on the afternoon of April the 21st. So not so long ago, we actually discussed this whole issue of rural economic development and the necessity of some serious attention being paid to it. I would like my remarks to be seen as a continuation of the remarks I made at that time. We had reached the point, or I had reached the point in my remarks of observing that there are serious problems in the rural economy and that there have been a huge number of failings on both the parts of the present government and the predecessor government under the leadership of the Liberals in their time. I'm not going to go through that again in any detail. The point I had reached was actually the point of trying to make some suggestions of what it is that should probably be done by way of alternatives. So I want to say immediately what it is that are the two top items on my list. One is education, and the other is sustainability. Now, I'm going to turn to other items that I think we should think about, but education and sustainability are the two main factors, the two main principles, the two main areas of effort that have to be kept in mind when any economic development ideas are being discussed in Nova Scotia. But first, before I get back to those, let me just list a few others. Immigration. Immigration as a way of increasing our population here is a very important thing to look at. We have entirely too small a domestic population, both in our province and all over Canada, and immigration has to be looked at seriously. We have to, when we think about what it is that an entity like Nova Scotia Business Inc. does, we have to make sure that they put smaller amounts of money at risk when they make their investments or loans. They should be favoring Indigenous Nova Scotians rather than come from away entities, because then those come from away entities or the businesses won't just be here because of the subsidies. They will be investing in businesses through people who really want to be in Nova Scotia. That's important. And next, as to the topics that they ought to invest in, they ought to invest in areas of enterprise for which we have a natural competitive advantage. Things that are linked, for example, to our marine heritage and knowledge, the things that are tied to the ocean and the land that we have here, that would make sense. But we have another area that they should think about, which is making linkages to our universities. That's another important thing that we have to see as a real potential driver of our economy here, both in the urban and rural areas, and it's overlooked. And indeed, we heard earlier some in question period, some questioning of whether Innova Corporation is really doing its job in that area. Next, I want to say that linkages have to be made with the federal government, particularly through the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, because that department has not been really doing its job. So, Mr. Speaker, sorry, do I have one more minute? Is that what I'm told? Okay. Yes. Well, I've got a longer list, but let me say then that I should turn to my two main points about education and sustainability. Education is clearly the way forward, and this government has failed to recognize that there is a linkage between high levels of education and the high fees that they've set up as barriers to entry to post-secondary education and economic development. Enough said on that. Let me just turn briefly to sustainability. Sustainability absolutely has to be the key philosophy of approach to all sectors of the economy, particularly the rural areas. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on this debate.
Thank you. Recognize the honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to spend my time on a positive note. I'm not going to be pointing fingers at anybody in the House. I believe that we can't deal in the past. We can only deal in the present and plan for the future. Taking a positive approach, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to say that down in Cape Breton, we believe in developing what we have. And down there, Mr. Speaker, we have it all. It's just that it's not recognized throughout the whole province. Take Route 223, that goes down through the centre of the island, that goes down through my riding of Victoria the Lakes. That's an area that could be maintained as a quiet respite for tourists. pave that road, keep it quiet for the community that lives there, and make it an enjoyable drive, a quiet Sunday-type drive, rather than the bustle and hustle that we face on a daily basis on our main roads. Let's move over to the highlands of Cape Breton. There's 730 kilometers of roads in the highlands alone. There's as big as Trans-Canada highways. They're dirt roads, but they're extremely well maintained, Mr. Speaker. I've suggested for years to people, why can't we have cruise ships come in, shuttle their passengers ashore in Ingonish, and they can rejoin their ship. If the ship is small enough to go under the Seal Island Bridge, they can rejoin their ship in Badek. If the ship is too large, it can sail into Sydney, and we can take the passengers back aboard in Sydney. And I've done this in other countries. Why can't we do that here? That's developing what we have. We have the ski hill, Mr. Speaker, that struggled for 2 years by being closed and is now under new operation agreement and management, and they seem to be doing reasonably well, wanting to keep it open in the summertime also. That's another area for not only for the view of the Highlands, but also could be a drawing card to get people to enter the Highlands through Wreck Cove and do the tourist thing. What I say, take them from the lap of artificial luxury aboard a cruise liner to the lap of nature, Mr. Speaker, and get them away from the hustle and bustle there. Mr. Speaker, we have a marine museum that's planned for the Barra Strait. Local initiative, local entrepreneurs doing studies and trying to develop, again, what we have. That will coincide exactly with international interests, simply because there's an area in the Bredor Lakes that's over 1,000 feet deep, that there's life in the bottom of that 1,000-foot vault that is only available out off of the continental shelf. We have something there that's not available anywhere else, and that's going to be eventually put on display. And of course, in the area where that's being developed, we have the Highland Village, which is rich in Scottish heritage and a good tourist promoter for our area. But Mr. Speaker, what I find that is wrong, I believe that Cape Breton has become a threat to the province. If we develop something down there, it's going to be at the expense of some other area of the province. But Mr. Speaker, we have the Cabot Trail that is an international icon that draws people from all over the world to the province. The whole province benefits from the Cabot Trail, not just that one area. So I don't know what the fear is there or what, but I would like to see people involved in economic development be true people persons and reach out and take somebody by the hand and walk them through the steps when they come with a good idea and a good business plan and good promotion, rather than say, here, go see this person, go see that, and put them off to somebody else. Somewhere along the line, nobody is willing to do the actual work to take these people by the hand and help them develop what we have. And Mr. Speaker, we're talking about putting the gas taxes into roads. People in rural areas spend more per capita in gas tax than anywhere else in the province. To go from the bottom end of my riding just to get up to Badek is a 2.5-hour drive. You'll use a lot more gas to and from home in that drive than you would that same amount of gas would do the average person a week or more in an urban area. Mr. Speaker, I hear a lot of reference complaining about the federal government. I know if I invited somebody with a gift, and before they even received it, I was told it's not enough. What else are you going to give me? How much more is coming? I'm dissatisfied with what I'm getting. I don't think I'd even give the gift. So I would like to take what is offered to me.
Order is a point of order. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Would entertain a question. I guess what I wanted to ask him, if he considers the transfer payments and equalization payments gifts to this province is not taking charity. This province is receiving from the government what we give.
Thank you. The honourable member, please continue.
debate fine about $155 checks. I think I got misconstrued there somewhere. But if that's what he's talking about, and a 10% tax break that was canceled, if that's what he's getting at, I don't know. But I said I was going to keep it in a positive vein, Mr. Speaker, and that's what I intend to do. And keeping it in a positive vein, and more money coming from the federal government, Mr. Mark Eiking announced $200,000 on last Saturday for a very small area in Ross Ferry. In Ross Ferry, a small little rural area to repair and replace the wharf there so that it can coincide with the development of the Bador Lakes, to turn to work and help ships to pump out. Maybe some of the honourable members, if they sail down in their yachts, if they're that fortunate, then we'll accept them giving them water and pump out their tanks for them. And of course, there will be a charge, by the way. That may deter some of you from coming. But anyway, Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to circumnavigate my riding. Meat Cove, Bay St. Lawrence and Cape St. Lawrence, phenomenal areas, knock the socks off of anybody with a view of the sea that from the higher points that you'd never get. Dingwall and Ingonish and Cape Smoky, the North Shore in Englishtown, Mr. Speaker. Then you're going to bump into the Gaelic College, go off to Bedeck, you're going to see the Bell Museum. And guess what? In Bedeck, Mr. Speaker, we can accommodate a convention that would require more than 400 rooms if that were required. That's probably information that the honourable members are not aware of. We have, as I mentioned, the Highland Village in Iona. We have Washabuck and Little Narrows, phenomenal rural areas, Mr. Speaker, that are well worth the drive and well worth the visit. Grand Narrows and Christmas Island. People come from all over just to have their Christmas cards mailed from there, Mr. Speaker. Boysdale and Ironville. Christmas Island, Boysdale, Ironville, these are exceptionally culturally strong places that really promote their culture, and they're extremely active, although they're very rural. We get into Georges River and Scotch Lake. There again, active fire departments, active ladies' auxiliaries, and Scotch Lake itself, a beautiful area where you can fish and relax along the lake. Beautiful Groves Point, where you can fish right off of the shore and enjoy the drive along the Bador Lake Scenic Drive. And you come to my area, Mr. Speaker, the island of Bulladry Island, beautiful beyond compare, a real jewel. And of course, it's Ross Ferry, where the wharf is being developed, is up the top end of that island. But Mr. Speaker, we have all this. I could go on and go into the Minister of Tourism's riding, places like Foot Cape, Cape Mabou, Glenora Falls. They'll knock the socks off of anybody. The view is just extraordinary. Why do we have to fight all the time to try and develop what we have? Are we that much of a threat to the rest of the province that we don't deserve to get? We're not even asking for a half a loaf. We're not even asking for a slice off the loaf, Mr. Speaker. Just once in a while, give it a little bit of the crust, that's all. Because we're very resilient. And as I said before, in Cape Breton, you either got to get tough or die. So I guess we're all tough down there because a lot of times we're hanging on by the bootstraps. And like I said, regardless of what the statistics say, there is a 20% unemployment. And yet those of us that choose to live there are not leaving. It's just that the students that owe phenomenal debts when they graduate, they're forced to leave. They have to leave, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm wondering why, when it comes to rural economic development, why the outcry not to have a Minister of Rural Economic Development? I've only described Cape Breton. I could have been describing down the South Shore, further down towards Yarmouth, or any rural area in Cape Breton, and the province itself. Because we all share a commonality in rural areas with our own water supplies and sewage supplies. So we have that in common. We're used to repairing our own and looking after ourselves. We don't pick up the phone and call a plumber anytime it's needed. We all do our own work, and that's where the resilience comes from. So, Mr. Speaker, I fail to see where the challenge is in regards to economic development for the area that I represent and for Cape Breton as a whole. Why is it that every little thing that we get, we have to fight for, and at the same time, there's that fear that, oh gee, don't when you cross that causeway, something happens. Well, come across the causeway and we'll look after you. That's what Cape Bretoners do. We're known for our hospitality. And yet there's this innate fear that if you do that, if we will lose favor with the larger areas of Nova Scotia if you come to Cape Breton or you speak in favor of us. So I don't know what it's going to take to overcome that. When I was warden in Victoria County for 3 years, Mr. Speaker, it was extremely evident. I was warden for 2000, 2001, 2002, and I experienced it firsthand that a continual fight between the province and the rural areas. You had to scrounge and scrape and scratch for every little bit that you got. And here it appears to be no different here on the provincial level. And I feel for my municipal colleagues that I shared 12 years with, because I know firsthand experience of what it takes to try and get something accomplished. And a lot of times when you're almost ready to make both ends meet, somebody from the province will come along and move the ends, Mr. Speaker, and you're back to square one again. Or if you're dealing with a minister and you seem to be moving forward and accomplishing something, guess what? Somebody tosses the dice and they change cabinet and you're back to a new member all over again. So it makes it extremely hard, but I've referred to it recently as the lords and the serfs. And it's just a way of keeping you down and keeping you down all the time. Why is that? I guess the old saying is that history repeats itself, Mr. Speaker. And here's no different example of it repeating itself, fighting for the little bit that we have, fighting to keep the little bit that we have, and not being able to stand up and brag about what we did receive this year or any year, other than just trying to maintain the status quo, just to keep ourselves on an even keel. With that, like you say, we can't keep our students there because they can't afford to pay their bills. They have to come to the big areas. But, Mr. Speaker, I would ask this government to see what we have in Cape Breton, to see what we have in Victoria, the Lakes, see what there is there to develop, and allow us to bring our ideas forward and look at them in a positive light and welcome us on board and say, yes, you do have something to offer to the province. Yes, you do have something that we can develop. And yes, we will move forward and we'll start a plan, a vision. 5 years, you see where you want to go. 10 years, where you intend to be. And say, we will do so much a year over a period of time, but not just for Cape Breton, but for all rural Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, and complete the plan in that way. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I thank the Honourable Speaker for the time to speak on rural economic development, and that concludes my remarks.
Order, please. The Honourable Member of Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill 65?
Bill number 65, the Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Welcome back to the chair, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
I was waiting with a bated breath. Mr. Speaker, Bill 65,
you were right.
Entitled an act referred to as the Gas Tax Accountability Act. Mr. Speaker, this particular piece of legislation is very short in form, very long and detailed in substance. It has 6 clauses, and the operative clauses, in principle, refer to several important issues. Number 1, the major components of the bill would require government to spend all gas tax revenue on capital and road maintenance. Secondly, it would require that any federal money transferred from Ottawa for transportation systems designated for municipalities would be required to go directly to those municipalities and not to the province. Further, Mr. Speaker, as it stands now, the federal government can't provide direct assistance to municipalities without going through the province. So this particular piece of legislation would ensure money from the federal government will go to its intended purpose if the federal government moves forward with the plan to provide gas tax for municipal transportation infrastructure, which all indications are it is. And we also know, Mr. Speaker, about the comments from the Prime Minister with regards to assisting municipalities on the HST rebate, at least the GST portion of the HST. Mr. Speaker, further, the Department of Transportation and Public Works would be required under this Act to file a report with the legislature that lists each road expenditure by project. And that's pretty much similar to the supplement to the public accounts. And this, Mr. Speaker, is a very important feature because it puts the onus on government, not just this government, but any government, the onus to prove that all gasoline taxes indeed go to roads. Further, Mr. Speaker, it allows all Nova Scotians the ability to have the checks and balances, or to ensure on an individual project-by-project basis if in fact the priorities of the government are achieved, and that the money that was intended for gasoline and the gasoline tax is in fact going towards road maintenance and capital construction. Now that's essentially the general framework of the legislation. Now some of the rationale to that, Mr. Speaker, is comes from points that were raised by the government back in 1999 when it ran for election, when it made a commitment in, as we all know, this very famous Blue Book, referred to as strong leadership and a clear course. Mr. Speaker, the then leader of the Conservative Party, who is now Premier, made a pledge that by year 2 of the Conservative mandate, which would approximately put it in the year 2001, that 100% of all road taxes and licensing fees and so on would go towards road maintenance and capital construction. Now, as well, Mr. Speaker, the government indicated in its Blue Book policy platform that it would prepare a 10-year roads plan. Well, Mr. Speaker, on numerous occasions, the Minister of Transportation and Public Works and his predecessor have indicated that they do in fact have a 10-year roads plan, but they've never ever made it available to anyone. And so I would ask the opportunity for the Minister of Transportation and Public Works today to table that for all members of the legislature, as well as for the people of Nova Scotia. In much the same vein, Mr. Speaker, as why the Minister of Transportation and Public Works are suppressing the issue with regards to the state of the bridges in the province of Nova Scotia. I believe there was a request through a Freedom of Information request to have that information provided, and the comeback from the department was, if you provide us with $15,000, we'll give you that report. Well, I think that's patently unfair. How does the minister and how does the government expect the people of Nova Scotia to have confidence that it is in fact achieving its goal of effective use of its resources on a priority-by-priority basis when it refuses to provide that information? Further, Mr. Speaker, just to give you some example, and I'll table this letter. It was a letter that was put out by, and I believe I made reference to it on a previous day, one of the opponents that I was challenged with in the last provincial election. And he submitted a letter to all the constituents indicating that he had prepared, with some friends and an engineer, a 4-year roads plan for the constituency of Cape Breton West. Mr. Speaker, subsequent to that, Mr. Speaker, I wrote and I asked for a copy of that, and I received back from the department confirmation that despite the fact that the claim in the letter, and I will provide it to the minister, that he had presented that to the previous Minister of Transportation and Public Works, the Honourable Michael Baker, on or about July 16th of 2003, and he sent out the letter on July 20th to all the people in Cape Breton West. The department sent back and said, we have no such plan. There's no such plan that exists. So what I'm saying is, that's just one anomaly. That happens to be in Cape Breton West. But I'm sure there's that type of of politics that goes on during elections, and you can appreciate that. But what happens is people lose confidence. People lose confidence in the process. There was a time back during the Donald Cameron administration, that short-lived administration, 85% of all dollars from the department went in government-held ridings. And in some cases, they were repaving roads that were in considerably good shape relative to some of the unpaved roads or some of the roads that were in a far more deplorable state in some of the non-government held ridings. So politics was a factor. Now, I do believe it's fair, as I've always said, it's important to give credit where credit is due. And I do believe that there has been some leveling out of that patronage factor within the department compared to what it was 10, 20, even 40, 50 years ago. When you go back to the days of the Harrington government when it was pretty bad. And that's about all I can say about it at this point. But, Mr. Speaker, and part of that has been addressed through the RIM program, and that's good. But that's only piecemeal. We have the RIM program. We have now the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Transportation Public Works saying that 100% of all these taxes are now going towards roads, and maybe some. Well, maybe it's because we're in a minority situation. Maybe it's because, there's a pending election, within the next several months, year, who knows when. Could be next week, as the Minister of Transportation says. But the fact of the matter is, that type of ad hoc and somewhat political approach to the governance on road issues in the province is just not acceptable anymore. And all three parties have been guilty of it. Now, I know the socialists have never formed government in this province, but all you have to do is see the actions of some of those members in the House, what they say and what they do aren't always consistent. Maybe that's the nature of the process. They have to put their arguments and, be altruistic about being all things to all people. But the practicality of the situation is they would like some of the roads in their constituencies fixed too, because they have obligations to their stakeholders. And, Mr. Speaker, that's fair. I believe this particular piece of legislation will further that leveling of the playing field. And it's an open and accountable forum that requires an annual report to be tabled before the legislature, so all members of the legislature will know in greater detail which areas of the province are being sacrificed. For example, the Minister of Transportation says the roads are in much better shape today than they were when this government came to office. So let's go with that argument. But if that's the case, then why have the number of claims against the Department of Transportation doubled for damages to vehicles, cars and trucks, and personal injury against the department since this government came to power? They're not my figures, Mr. Speaker. They're the figures out of the minister's department. But yet, the payout to the claims has been reduced significantly so the government can ignore the problem. And it's now putting the onus more and more on the individual Nova Scotians. It's like years ago they said during the days of Napoleon that the French decree during his era was that you're guilty until you're proven innocent. Well, that's almost pretty much the same as what's happening with this government. It's your fault until you can prove, beyond the shadow of a doubt, it's because of the poor road conditions that you have a claim against the department. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure you know in yourself, we've read in the newspapers the number of times concerns about that guardrail in a certain part of your constituency where there was a very unfortunate accident where I believe someone died as a result of that. I'm not even sure if that guardrail has even been replaced or installed. Don't know. But they're the types of issues that I think could all be taken out and put in a proper form so that people, even if things aren't going to change in the way the department functions, Let's presume that they are doing the very best that they can. And there's not that type of partisan political approach to road issues that once existed. Let's assume that. And we have to give the benefit of the doubt. Then there'd be no problem in tabling all this information and make it readily available. There's no problem with an annual report. There's no problem, Mr. Speaker, with ensuring that if what the government says is putting more into roads, than the taxes that are raised, then in fact, they would be doing themselves a favor by allowing this information to come forth. Just to say it without any basis in fact is not simply good enough. Mr. Speaker, I see the minister is getting a little anxious on the time factor. So I guess maybe that's why you got in the chair, Mr. Speaker, because I knew you'd be captivated by this very important issue, because anything I could do to plead for you and all other MLAs for their constituents, I will do it, Mr. Speaker.
We appreciate
With that, I move that this bill be for further debate.
Thank you. Recognize the Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works, and I thank you for your assistance there, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it is indeed a pleasure to address this bill number 36, I believe it's 65. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is a well-intentioned member. I know that, and I respect his views on most things, and sometimes I worry about the advice that he must get from his caucus, or perhaps from the staff that they employ down at the Liberal caucus office. Because, Mr. Speaker, the main thrust of this bill is that monies that are collected from motor fuel taxes should go onto the highways. And, Mr. Speaker, nothing I think could be a stronger motive for us as government, particularly rural members, than to achieve that. So that when we came into power, Mr. Speaker, in the year 1999, one of the commitments that we made was that over the first term we would indeed move to invest in the highway system the taxes that we bring in from motor fuels. And, Mr. Speaker, surprise, surprise, this honourable member's arrived at the station after the train has left. We actually got there last year. We invested more money in the highways last year than we took in motor fuel taxes. Sorry about that. And, Mr. Speaker, insofar as the commitment that we made, Mr. Speaker, with regard to the 10-year plan that the honourable member was talking about, we said there was already a 10-year plan in place that the previous government, Mr. Speaker, I think it was Richie Mann that came forward with the 10-year plan back in 1995 or something, or other, was it 96, somewhere in that area. Mr. Speaker, what we said was, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. We took that 10-year plan, Mr. Speaker, and we updated. And, Mr. Speaker, I think I tabled that 10-year plan in this House in 2001. Once again, I don't know where the member was. Maybe he was out the airport waiting for an airplane or something. But
Order, please. All member Cape Breton West on the point of order.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like the minister to be aware of the fact that that's not the commitment that's made in the Tory Blue Book. The Tory Blue Book simply states a nonpartisan road plan, and it says 10-year highway road plan. That's what they would prepare within the first year, and we're still looking for it. Where is it?
Order, please. Not a point of order, but certainly a question that was put by the honourable member Cape Breton West. The honourable Deputy Premier.
Maybe you should check the bottom of his desk, because I can remember clearly handing out the 10-year plan. It wasn't called anything different. It was the same type of plan, Mr. Speaker, but it was updated for this government. And, Mr. Speaker, as I think it was tabled in 2001. But however, I will try and find back in the archive somewhere a copy of that 10-year plan and make sure that the honourable member gets it. In fact, I'll send it by FedEx just to be absolutely sure. Mr. Speaker, as I said last year, we spent more money on roads and bridges and other highway structures than we took in taxes. This year we will spend about $261 million, Mr. Speaker, in capital.
Order, please. Young member Cape Breton Weston, point of order.
Mr. Speaker, in the minister's own budgetary documents here, clearly contradicts what the minister is saying. According to the revenues generated, $255,872,000 to be collected, and yet in their own departmental estimates, $241 million. So clearly there's a deficiency, and that's the issue to which we speak.
Order, please. Not a point of order again, but it's a disagreement of facts between two members. The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Yes, there is indeed a gap between the two members. Mr. Speaker, what I just said was we will spend about $261 million this year in capital and operating dollars on our roads, bridges, and transportation systems, and we will collect about $255 million. Let me stress, Mr. Speaker, that's $5 or $6 million more dollars on roads and bridges than we take in provincial taxes. Mr. Speaker, of the $255 million, $261 million that we're spending this year, Mr. Speaker, there will be about $113 million in capital spending, $132 million in operational spending, and about $16 million in general maintenance on our highway system. Mr. Speaker, the honourable members will recall that the province increased its share of gasoline taxes by 2 cents per litre in 2002. That measure is creating $25 million in capital funds for highway improvements, and it came into effect last year, Mr. Speaker, and that's money that's going directly into our roads. Mr. Speaker, as an example, Mr. Speaker, our project completions on the provincial transport system in our last year included the twinning of 21 kilometres of Highway 101. We went from Mount Uniacke to Ellis House, the second step on our way down to Colebrook. We opened the Marguerite Bridge, $10 million. We completed the Seal Island Bridge. Renovations over 3 years, $15 million. Mr. Speaker, this was a bridge design project that was recently, I think it was just last week, presented with the Lieutenant Governor's Award for Engineering Excellence. They did a fantastic job. Mr. Speaker, major projects underway in 2004, 2005, that's this fiscal year. We'll be working on the next phase of the 101 from St. Croix or Ellis House down to Avonport. We'll be doing substantial upgrades on the 103, including $19 million worth of capital work on that highway this year, Mr. Speaker, which presents about 17% of our total capital expenditures. 17%, Mr. Speaker, going on Highway 103, a very, very high volume highway, Mr. Speaker, one that is not part of our national highway system. It's one that we have to spend the total 100% of provincial funding on. We're also doing, as part of that project, Mr. Speaker, perhaps I should explain, we're twinning the section from Tantallon up to the present twin section, Mr. Speaker. That's $16 million. And down near Barrington, we're spending $3 million worth of work down there, including a new bridge across the Willis River, a Willis branch of the Barrington River, and we're putting in an interchange there and new road beds. We're spending money up in Cape Breton, Mr. Speaker, twinning Highway 125, as the honourable member knows, a very, very important part of the highway system between North Sydney and Sydney. Mr. Speaker, we're going to do a complete new design for the interchange at the end of at Cox Heath, right. Mr. Speaker, we're investing $9 million this year in steel bridge replacement. We're going to spend $50 million over the next 5 years to replace 66 of those steel truss bridges, Mr. Speaker, that are famed in song and story. They go back, some of them 100, 110, 120 years. Mr. Speaker, These are good bridges, but they're not good bridges for the environment that we have at the present time and the type of traffic that we have. So, Mr. Speaker, we have to replace those bridges, and that's $150 million. On top of that, Mr. Speaker, we're spending another $34 million on the general bridge system across this country. That includes a number of reinforced concrete structures that we will be building. We're putting this year, Mr. Speaker, into RIM. Into RIM, we're putting in another $2.5 million for a total of $12.5 million. Mr. Speaker, this is a program that not only assists the rural areas of our province, Mr. Speaker, but it also assists our budget, because under the RIM program, where we have small contractors doing relatively small jobs, we're getting excellent prices, Mr. Speaker, and we're doing a tremendous amount of work under the RIM program, I think, as every rural member is aware. Mr. Speaker, the capital budget for the transportation system has increased by $68.7 million since the year 2000. That was the first budget year of this government, Mr. Speaker. That represents a 250% increase. Mr. Speaker, I'm very, very pleased that we have $112 million this year, Mr. Speaker, but that's not enough. That is not enough, Mr. Speaker. We can't fix all our bridges. We can't fix all our roads. That's why we have a 10-year, $3.5 billion road and bridge infrastructure deficit at the present time, Mr. Speaker, and it's one that we're going to have to address. And I tell you, Mr. Speaker, we're not going to solve it overnight, because, Mr. Speaker, to bring the highway system of Nova Scotia up to scratch, we need something in the order of about $200 million per annum for capital spending. So we're a little bit over halfway there, but we still have a long way to go. However, Mr. Speaker, I can assure you that this government is committed to increasing the capital funding every year, Mr. Speaker, and we will get there. We have to get there, Mr. Speaker, because the highway system now is the carrier of the majority of our exports, imports into this province, with the disappearance of the rail system, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Pictou West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I too welcome this opportunity to have a few minutes to speak on this bill 65, which is an act to provide accountability for the expenditure of taxes on gasoline and diesel oil. And I heard the minister giving along and list there of road improvements and projects in Cape Breton and the Valley. I didn't hear anything from Pictou West. So just for the minister's attention, I'll bring a couple of those roads to his attention, so he'll not forget our beautiful North Shore area of the province as well. But one road in particular comes to my mind is the White Hill Road. It's located just back of Westville, and it's about 6 kilometers long, and it's probably could win the prize as the worst road in Nova Scotia. It's deplorable. It's atrocious. And I just hope that the minister is listening. It's a road that the residents of that area are spending a lot of their hard-earned dollars on repairing their vehicles. Everything from wheels and rims to wheel alignments, front-end parts, shocks and mufflers, and on it goes. So just for the minister's attention, I want to make sure that he was aware of at least one road in Pictou West that needs attention. I want to take a minute, Mr. Speaker, and come to the actual bill. And I think the bill is probably it is a good one. I think it's probably supported by all three parties in this House. And it seems to make sense that we dedicate all of our gasoline and diesel fuel revenue. And I don't see specifically in the bill that would include registered motor vehicle licensing fees or driver's licenses, but perhaps that should be included as well. But because that's revenue that's related to our roads and that probably that revenue should go back into fixing and repair and maintaining our rural infrastructure. But the bill itself is pretty simple, and I think nobody in this House would probably disagree with it. The difficulty, of course, is that governments change, governments get different priorities, and in time they decide that there's different priorities that other than roads or highways or bridges. And there's no guarantee, of course, in this province that that this is going to happen. Now, the minister says that he's reached that objective just last year, but I know last year also every department was told to cut back and slash, and I think it was something like $4.4 million was cut out of the Department of Transportation and Public Works last November, I think it was. It was certainly a step in the wrong direction. We were going backwards, and I think it happened once earlier in last year, the fiscal year last year. So even though you set a budget and say we're going to have this amount for highways and bridges and roads, there's no guarantee that's going to stay that way.
Order, please. The Mr. Transportation, Public Works, and the point of order.
Speaker, on a point of order, I suppose it's more a point of clarification. The honourable member said that we cut back $2 million. Actually, Mr. Speaker, what we did was we transferred money from summer operations to winter operations because of the fact that the previous year had been a fairly disastrous year insofar as snow removal was concerned, and our salt domes had not been filled up before the end of the fiscal year. So as a result, we needed extra money for the winter season.
Thank you. Clarification of facts for the House. The honourable member for Pictou West has the floor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. But I do believe every government department except Health and Education, I believe, were told that they had to pare back their budget and reduce it. And I know a couple of occasions, I'm sure that maintenance to the department was pared back. But anyway, that's maybe a point that we can argue about later. But anyway, the point I was really trying to make, Mr. Speaker, was that there's no guarantee just because a government sets their budget that they will follow that through in the 12 months of the fiscal year. And it's been known to happen in various departments that money runs short or there's greater need somewhere else for dollars, and that budget is no longer what it's scheduled to be. So I think the only way to make sure that the dollars that are allocated from the gasoline and diesel fuel would remain at least equal to the amount of maintenance it's budgeted for is to enact it in legislation and make sure that no government has at their whim may change it. And the government of Saskatchewan recently brought in a bill to that effect that they legislated it that all revenue from gas and diesel sales in the province would have to go towards road maintenance and road repair in that province. So it's legislated forever that that will be there in that province, and that's really what this bill is all about, that it would guarantee that it would stay and that at the whim of a government wouldn't change it partway through a fiscal year. So Premier Calvert has enacted that in legislation in Saskatchewan, and I sincerely believe it is the right way to go. Now, the minister mentioned earlier that we have perhaps have gotten there, that there's a fairly equal balance in the amount of revenue that's coming in from gas and diesel oil as compared to the maintenance that's on our highways. Of course, but one thing that we perhaps overlook a little bit is that every time the price of gas goes up, and that's certainly been happening recently, then there's extra revenue coming to the government from the increased HST that's on the higher price of the fuel. And perhaps that's something that should be considered as well, because that is a direct cost to the driver when they gas up at the tanks. That extra revenue then is going into government coffers, but it's not guaranteed then that it would go into road maintenance, and I think that's something that should also be considered. I understand last year the HST income in the province in total was around $1 billion. I don't know what portion of that was collected from gasoline and diesel fuel, but certainly it would be a fair portion that would come from that source. And it seems logical to me that if you're spending all your dedicated motor fuel tax on road maintenance, then HST is part of that. You pay at the pumps, and probably that should be included, especially when the price of gas is continuing to go up. I want to mention, Mr. Speaker, the government in their Blue Book in 1998 had indicated that they would dedicate all taxes raised through motor vehicle licensing and fuel sales to highway construction and maintenance to provide a solid base for highway spending, which may be increased depending on the public need and the available revenues. So they at that time had committed to this principle. The Liberal Party here today, by introducing this bill, has committed to this principle, and we in the official opposition certainly are committed to the idea of all fuel and gas tax going towards maintenance and repair of our secondary roads. So why do we need to ensure that? It's because our roads in this province are in very, very poor shape. And you go to any MLA in this House, they'll tell you pretty well they've got roads galore that are in need of repair. And I can tell you about a few in Pictou West that I mentioned earlier when you were talking to the Speaker, Mr. Minister, was the White Hill Road, but that's deplorable, in really poor shape, and it needs repair. It's probably the worst road in this province, in my opinion. But I'll give you a few more, just in case you have extra dollars you want to allocate to the North Shore. The Green Hill Road, Sylvester Road, the Alma Road, which runs between Alma and Lions Brook, the Trunk 4 Highway at Salt Springs and Mount Tom. There's a group there that have worked hard this winter and spring trying to create some economic development opportunities in that area. Perhaps you're familiar with them, Mr. Minister. And they have identified the Trunk 4 Highway as very important priority for economic development opportunities in that area of our county. The Sunrise Trail that runs through River John and Tony River needs improvement as well. That's very important for tourism. The West Branch Road, the previous member from Pictou West lived on that road and was partly done last year, but the section from the McKay Road to the West Branch corner is, well, it's got grass growing in between the cracks about yay high at times, and it has to be mowed by midsummer. The West Branch Road, as I mentioned, the Scottsburn Road is very poor through the village of Scottsburn towards West Branch. One of the main routes through my riding, Mr. Speaker, is Highway 376, and it's well traveled by ferry traffic coming off the Rotary, and it's in very poor shape at the present time. It needs a minimum of patching. It could use replacement for sure. The Scotch Hill Road, again, a road on a former MLA from Pictou West. The president lives on, Donald McGuinness would live on that particular road. So there's lots of roads in my riding, in my area of the province, as there is in all the ridings throughout the province that really need improvement. And by dedicating this gas tax, we ensure we'd have more money. By considering the motor vehicle or the registry motor vehicle licenses and permits, would ensure extra dollars to well-needed maintenance that's in this province. And perhaps the consideration of HST on gasoline, dedicating that portion towards our crumbling infrastructure, would then allow enough money to get all the work done that's required. I know you have a 10-year plan, although I haven't personally seen it, but there's no question there's many roads out there that need repair. So this bill, Mr. Speaker, I think is good, and if we were to enact it in this province, it would ensure, like Saskatchewan, that we have enough money dedicated towards roads to improve the infrastructure in this province. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. And recognize the member for Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage, on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member from Kings West for giving me a chance to do a brief introduction. In the West Gallery is my brother, Robert DeVoe, who's also my official agent in the last 3 elections and the head of finance for Corporate Express here in Halifax. I was hoping we could give him a warm round of applause for...
We certainly welcome the younger brother of the honourable member of Coharbridge and Passage to the gallery today. The honourable member Kings West has the floor.
Gosh, it's almost as good as late debate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Certainly a pleasure today to rise on this bill. Certainly this was one of the areas that we were very, very strong on in our platform during the last election. And this bill would require government to spend all tax revenue, capital, and road maintenance. And we've had, of course, issue taken with by the minister today in that regard. And as a neophyte politician to the House, I am wondering if the Minister of Transportation and Public Works would be willing to entertain a question. No? Can't? Okay. I thought perhaps because Okay, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I'm wondering if the minister would at least clarify for me what is included with transportation and public works, because I guess my knowledge of that and perhaps the reality are two different things.
Okay, you're on. Get up and kill 15 minutes.
Order, please. I guess we're going to revert to question period, reverse question period. But anyway, now, Mr. Transportation Public Works, if you want to take some of the honourable member's time, he's offered to give it to you.
Mr. Speaker, if he checks the estimates, I think he'll see what the Department of Transportation and Public Works encompasses. It runs the gamut from buildings to communication systems to some financial systems. Mr. Speaker, it's a very, very broad mandate.
Thank you. The honourable member Kings West has the floor.
That certainly then gives me great wonder about the fact of the collection of all gasoline taxes going into the roads of the province, because we do collect $255 million from gasoline taxes, and we're spending a total of $241 million on transportation and public works. So if Public Works is including some capital construction around the province, we certainly don't have all of our dollars going into the roads of the province. So I would say that certainly is an area that is in great dispute, not only in this House, but I'm sure with the population of Nova Scotia. This bill would also ensure that money from the federal government would go to its intended purpose if the federal government moves forward with plans to provide gas tax for municipal transportation infrastructure. And that again we would be able to see the transparency of that money going directly to the 18 counties of the province. The Transportation Department would have to file a report with the legislature that lists each road expenditure by project. And of course, again, Nova Scotians would see the exact dollars for projects and know, in fact, that the work was being carried out. And this is most important because it puts the onus on the government to prove that indeed all gas taxes go into the roads, and would allow Nova Scotians to check by individual project, which then we would see, in fact, the monies being spent. That being said, Mr. Speaker, certainly as I traveled Kings West during the last election, this was an issue that was on the minds of many of my rural constituents. That, in fact, the roads that they rely upon every day for basic transportation, but also, of course, requiring that they would indeed be safe throughout the year. We know that in rural Nova Scotia in particular, our highway systems, in fact, are so key and are, in fact, the underpinnings of good rural economic development, which is becoming really, I think, the issue of the day. First, when I came to the House, one of the roads that I made known to all representatives here was a road called the Ward Road, which will take people to the Oak Lawn Zoo. And this is a road that's basically a sand-sealed piece of pavement over sand, and now it has about at least 100,000 visitors alone. This year they're anticipating 100,000. Last year they were about 90,000. And with the, of course, with the Congress Modial on this summer, they're anticipating at least 100,000 people. And this is a piece of road that, again, requires some work, and which I think is very important to tourist development in our area. So this is the kind of area that I think we absolutely need to be addressing, and where, in fact, we did make that commitment to rural residents this summer during the election. And certainly, when I take a look at other industries and businesses in the valley that rely upon the secondary roads in particular, there's one that has come to light just in recent months, and we're hoping that maybe a hardening project for this road will in fact be an economic benefit to the area and a saving to all concerned. And that is valley waste. Currently, during the months in which there are weight restrictions on the road, now require 4 trips to their natural 1 trip during the remaining months of the year. So this is the kind of work that, if we get in rural Nova Scotia, I think is of great benefit from a business perspective. So in our area, we also, of course, have the Michelin plant, which has, again, a very significant number of tractor-trailer units that are moving through that area. And now we know the #1 highway has simply become too busy for these. And of course, if we could get an interchange a little further west of the Colebrook, interchange around Waterville area, would certainly be a much safer proposition for this area. So we can see in that particular aspect. Go on for a moment to agriculture. One of the things that's happening in the valley now, and which does affect our roads in a very significant way, is that this summer we'll be losing another of the grain mills, with Shoregain moving to Moncton. And what will happen, of course, is that larger units will be, in fact, coming down and having to use the secondary roads. And again, many of those, especially when we look at the 12-month period, we will have a great deal of difficulty, of course, keeping those roads in a sustainable fashion for that kind of need that the agricultural community is starting to point out to us. Interestingly enough, when we talk about that $255 million figure that's going into the roads of the province, it's an interesting look back in time that in 99, just before the election of 99, the member from the beautiful Colchester Musquodoboit Valley, he pointed out that the progressive conservative policy on highway improvements calls for all monies generated either through provincial gasoline taxes and registry of motor vehicle revenues to be spent on our highway system. This proposal would result in approximately $255 million being spent on our highway system across Nova Scotia annually, and that was in, of course, 99. So if we look at the inflationary factors, we know that this amount was an absolute basic at that time, and we know that, of course, that amount is not going into our roads today. And if that was the requirement 5 years ago, we know that there are, in fact, a number of deficiencies when it comes to the dollars that are going in. So, Mr. Speaker, with just a minute and a half to wrap
please.
up.
The honourable member's time has expired. Thank you very much. Honourable member Cape Breton South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That completes the Liberal Party's business for today, and I would turn it over to the Government House Leader.
Thank you very much. The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I move the House to now rise to meet again tomorrow at the hour of 12 noon. The House will sit from 12 till 8, and following the daily routine question period, we'll do 4 hours in supply, and then, Mr. Speaker, we will carry on with the public bills for second reading, starting with the Financial Measures Act. So, Mr. Speaker, I move the House to now rise.
Motion is the House adjourned to 12 noon tomorrow. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. We've now reached the moment of introduction. The introduction, yeah. We've done so many introductions today. The moment of interruption. The honourable member for Waverley, Fall River.